I rise in support of the Protect Our Kids Act, which represents an improved version over legislation that I introduced about a year ago. We are reminded, as Chairman Camp indicated, by the tragedy in Connecticut, each family touched by the damage, the deaths of these youngest Americans. And in contrast, as with so many families, in our family we share the joy of 3 little girls. And it is just as difficult as it is to conceive of the wrong, the evil that occurred in Connecticut so recently. It is similarly difficult to conceive of how many of our youngest Americans are the subject of abuse and even death. We, through the Protect Our Kids Act, are seeking to have thoughtful consideration of what steps we can take to protect these most vulnerable children. We're not interested in another commission that just prepares another report that gets filed somewhere. We're interested in action coming from this commission. The original legislation, which was filed in a way that provided for its consideration in a number of committees, has been, in terms of jurisdiction, narrowed somewhat. But the objectives of the legislation remain as broad as they ever were, to explore every aspect of child abuse leading to child fatalities, and to find more bipartisan solutions to addressing that serious matter. I reflect on the testimony of a witness from Dallas, Madeline McClure, the Executive Director of the Texas Association for Protection of Children, who testified before our committee very recently that the estimate of 753,000 children being abused and neglected in America is a conservative one, but that, to put it in context, if you filled the Alamo Dome, Darrell K. Royal Stadium in Austin, the Hubert Humphrey Metrodome in Minneapolis, Yankee Stadium, the stadium in Georgia, in Tennessee, Tiger Stadium in Louisiana, the Rose Bowl, the CenturyLink Fields in Washington State, you would still have, you would fill that and still not cover all of the children who are subject to abuse and neglect each year in this country. And almost half of those children that are abused are age 4 or under. Our bill provides an opportunity to take an important step forward in developing a national strategy to protect our most vulnerable children. The Commission, appointed by the President and Congress, would develop recommendations to reduce the number of children who die from abuse and neglect. The Commission would bring together a group of experts from around the country in a wide variety of professions to identify prevention efforts. So little of the resources that we focus on abused and neglected children in America today goes to prevention, and that should be an important focus in a broad sense, as well as the collection of good data so that we can adequately compare what's happening and can also understand the best practices that are already underway in many communities across America. As we listen to experts, both in our recent hearing in front of the Subcommittee on Human Resources and last year when we held a hearing, we note the need for what one called an accessible blueprint for the states to implement better child prevention abuse strategy. That's a blueprint that this Commission can provide. In my home state of Texas, there are groups like Voices for Children in San Antonio, CASA, children's shelters in San Antonio, Austin, and other communities, Tex Protects, that are all serving as a voice for the voiceless and trying to prevent child abuse. There are local leaders like Texas State Senator Carlos Ureste, who was the moving force behind the Texas Blue Ribbon Task Force and the Bexar County Task Force on Child Abuse. This important work that these folks are doing has been of great benefit, but despite it, the fatalities that are stemming from child abuse continue to grow, and they're almost at epidemic proportions in Texas and in San Antonio in particular. Last year, there were almost 6,000 confirmed cases of child abuse in the San Antonio area in Bexar County, the highest number in Texas, higher than even Houston and Harris County, which has about twice the population. In the last decade, Texas had over 2,000 children who were killed, who died as a result of abuse and neglect. And last year, we had a total in Texas of nearly 66,000 confirmed cases. That's just too much. There is more that we can do, that we must do to protect these youngest Americans. Child abuse and neglect is not isolated. The children don't just bounce back. The consequences of abuse and neglect are felt throughout the lifetime and indeed often from one generation to another. These conditions can linger for a very long time. The data are clear. Among those adults who have experienced the highest level of childhood trauma, these individuals were 5 times more likely to suffer from alcoholism, 9 times more likely to be involved in drug abuse, 3 times more likely to be clinically depressed, and 4 times more likely to be addicted to nicotine. Additional research shows a relationship between childhood abuse and the presence of a range of adult diseases. In the past, this Congress' adoption of expert advice has provided progress in dealing with the issue of child neglect and abuse. We made some positive changes to the way children are placed in foster care and have elevated child safety as a primary welfare goal for the states. But as evidenced by the statistics, there are gaps in policy. There's much more work to be done to reduce the number of children who die each year in the hands of someone who's supposed to be caring for them. The Protect Our Kids Act is a significant step in the right direction, and I urge its approval, reserving the balance of my time.